This is Here in My Time, and I am so thankful and excited you've tuned in to this very first season of my brand new podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Hunt, and I am so honored to say that this first season of 16 episodes, hour-long weekly segments, is actually sponsored by one of my favorite stores in downtown Huntington, Indiana. Can you tell the excitement in my voice? That's right, you've guessed it, Turn the Page Books and Music Store. Rex is the owner of this fine establishment. This is the place to go if you are looking for your next read or to add to your vinyl collection. It is jam-packed full of used books, everything from fiction to nonfiction, and of course a huge variety of records from rock and roll to Taylor Swift. And let me tell you, Rex is the perfect owner because he is a music library. If you need help picking out your first record or maybe adding to your collection, this is the man for you. Whenever you walk in the door, music is playing constantly. You got perfect lighting. You've got the wooden floors. It's the perfect vibe to enjoy your day in. So make sure you stop in and visit and also follow him on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you so much, Rex, for your support. It means the world to me. Now on to the episode. Before I share this interview, I wanted to take a moment and say that this story does contain domestic violence. It is incredibly important that this conversation is used to provoke awareness of this subject. If you or anyone you know are in this position, know that you are not alone and that there is a way out. Rebekah has provided information and references to help you, and it will be in the description box of the episode and also the article that goes with this episode on my social media at Here in My Time. If there's anything that this episode shows, it's the power of overcoming and that you can do it and that there is hope. As someone who has the honor of hearing these stories and then being able to share these stories, I want to provide my guest with the safest place possible. I rather my guest feel safe and comfortable more than anything, more than having an episode to share. Because it's not about the episode, it's about the person. And I want my guests to know that they have been heard and seen and that their story matters. So on that note, my guest had and will continue to have full control of this episode. It has been pre-listened to and pre-approved before published. So, with that being said, please grab your notebook, grab a cup of coffee, and just listen to this story, because that is what is the most important thing. This is Here in My Time, the podcast dedicated to bridging the gap between generations. I'm your host, Lauren Hunt, a local personal journalist, photographer, documentarian, and a lover of people and their stories, located here in Wabash, Indiana. Today, I am documenting the life of Rebekah O'Neal, which is a good friend of mine. Most people probably would know her as a realtor, but I know of her as an actress and a very great dancer. So I am so glad that she said yes today, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me on. I will say I'm nervous, but excited to be here.
I mean, it's nothing to be nervous about because I mess up all the time, and it is a nerve-wracking thing, I realize. But it's just two friends having a good conversation. We've been catching up behind the scenes beforehand. When I was taking her portrait, it was nice to just kind of catch up as friends and see what everybody's been up to. I would love to kind of talk to you a little bit. One of the excuses I have with this podcast is I get to know people a little bit more deeper than what I know them already. So I'd love to know about your childhood. When and where were you born? We'll start there.
I was born in a little town in Indiana called Eaton, somewhere in the Muncie direction. I'd have to look at a map to figure out where it is again. Third oldest of 12 children. Yes, they're all from the same parents. They got married in 1975 and had my oldest sister the next year. And, we moved around some when I was growing up. There was a house in Warsaw, one in Winona Lake, one in Pierceton. There's a gray farmhouse somewhere that I don't know where it was, but we lived in several different places. I remember, as far as some of the memories, just mom cooking a lot. I started helping her in the kitchen when I was probably 5, and I would say helping is kind of a generous term because when you're 5 and helping, it's not really much fun for the mom. or the dad, whoever is the adult there in that situation. But I do remember spending a lot of my time in the kitchen at that age and trying to copy mom. I do remember quite a bit of fun just playing outside. I remember learning to read at about 5 years old. Mom, my mom taught me, and I remember at 5 years old reading parts of the King James Bible because
Mhm.
that's what we had there. Then when I entered school, I did well in first grade, but in second grade, there was a teacher that, as I recall, she just had it out for me. I don't know what her problem was with me, but I didn't want to read for her, and so she stuck me in the class with kids with disabilities so that because she thought I couldn't read. She ended up apologizing to my parents later on that year when she realized I was fine. I just wasn't reading for her or reading to the level that she wanted. But I've always looked back on that teacher with a bit of a grudge, although I should just let it go. It's been long enough. I don't want to hold on to grudges, but she rubbed me the wrong way at that time, and I still bothers me that she did that to me. Trying to think of some other as I think back on my life and my childhood, I don't feel like I don't feel like I'm very interesting.
No,
So,
you are, and that's my job to hopefully ask you the right questions. What was your relationship with your mom like? You said you helped her a lot. Were you a mama's girl? Were you that kind of thing, or were you more of a daddy's girl? I mean,
I f- I think I was more of a daddy's girl, but I loved both my parents, of course. I'm trying to remember back. Mom was always busy with whatever the new baby was. And in a big family, there's always a toddler or a new baby. She necessarily was just extremely busy raising
Mhm.
kids and taking care of the home while my dad was at work every day. So I don't have bad memories. I just have a lot of memories mixed in with lots of other kids
right.
involved because she was just extremely busy. I know looking back, I honestly have no idea how she did it because if I were in her shoes, I think I would have fallen apart. But she did it one day at a time. She raised us all. And then, um, as far as the dynamic with my parents or with my mom, as I look back, I think we had some of the normal rough patches that when I was a teenager, of course, I knew everything under the sun. I didn't want to listen, thought she didn't know what she was talking about. By the time I was in my mid 20s, I realized my parents were actually pretty smart.
Mm, yeah.
And, um, but it took some time there for my brain to catch up with reality there.
Do you recall, like, a moment when being raised in a big family, and you're talking about, like, the moment spent with mom or dad alone wasn't probably a lot, right? Like, they were very busy, but do you remember maybe a memory that looks back on, the moments that you did spend together alone? Was there something that was just special that you remember?
One thing I remember doing was mom would take turns taking one of us with her to the grocery store. And that was our special time with mom. We'd usually get a treat of some sort. But with as many kids as there were in the family, we didn't get a lot of one-on-one time. So that was a coveted time that we had. We always looked forward to, our turn to go to the grocery store with mom. There were times too that she had us all in tow, which again, I'm not sure how that happens in real life. Logistically, that's a nightmare. But we looked forward to our time there. And with dad, we would go with him on Saturday mornings, for instance, if he had errands to run or he had to go get a haircut, he would take one or two of us at a time to have special time with us. That we didn't, it was just something to look forward to. We did get time with both parents individually, it was just more spaced out and planned in those cases. But also looking back, I didn't feel alone or that
Mhm.
I didn't have I always felt like I had their support,
Mhm.
and love. And looking back on my family, I remember a very loud household because that many people are going to be loud, but it was also full of love too.
Right, right. Was there's I always think about growing up, the things that I can remember are certain moments. It's not always like for some reason something will trigger something in my mind, whether it's a song or whatever it might be. But I can remember sitting upstairs and at the time my dad was in a singing group and they would practice downstairs in the house. And I can remember the music ringing up through
Mhm.
the floorboards, and it was always such a special time. It was like the smell of the mics when we would go sing
Mhm.
because there was, like, these covers on it, and there was something to the smell. Was there a certain, like, sound or smell that takes you home?
When I hear Handel's Messiah, that's one thing that does. It's a piece that has been in my memory for as long as I can remember. Also, music was a big part of our lives. I remember mom sitting down and playing the piano once she'd put everyone to bed. She would sit down and play whatever she wanted to play on the piano. And so we would go to sleep to piano music just about every night that's what I remember when I was little. I can't remember how long that happened, but music and piano playing was her way of unwinding and decompressing after what I can imagine was a completely chaotic day. My perspective has changed as I've grown to realize what exactly my mom went through
Oh
trying to raise
gosh.
us all. As a child, I had no idea what it took. I didn't realize that I was being a normal bother as a kid,
Mhm.
you know, but she never made me feel like I was being a bother. So, yeah, a lot of music in my memories. I remember my dad learning to play banjo. He started when he was 39, just decided this is what he wanted to learn. So he took some lessons, played that for a while. To my knowledge, he's not actively playing that currently, but he's picked up other instruments in the meantime
Mhm.
and um, learned those. And one thing that I've admired is that he didn't let an age stop him from becoming more. And he learned things when other people would say, "Well, it's too late to learn," even though 39 seems really, really, really young right now.
Right. I think that's something that I can't wait to talk to you about as we get further into this episode because, you've taken on a lot of new things in your
hmm
life. I want to know because it sparks from somewhere every single time and it usually sparks back in childhood. What were you like as a child? Can you describe yourself as a kid growing up?
Let's see. What was I like? I remember being a tomboy. I remember liking the color red for as long as I can remember. That's been my favorite color. It always will be fire engine red. I had a certain outfit specifically in the first grade that I remember wearing probably as often as mom let me wear it. But it was a red sweater and some little plaid skirt to go with it. So I've always been pretty opinionated. Um, and
Do you think that comes from being from a large family? Because some people, in a large family either compress down or rise up. Like, as far as the
Mhm.
dynamics of the different kids, like the older ones and then
Yes.
the younger ones, like, whatever it might be. Do you think that stems from childhood?
I think there were parts of me. We were also raised in a church culture that, looking back, I don't agree with many parts of it. It was very patriarchal, and I learned in some cases to just stifle myself. Now, I don't remember that so much as a kid, but I adopted that characteristic more as a young adult. And I can talk more about that later, but it did stifle me for a long time. But as a child, I do remember wanting to have my voice heard and being opinionated, but also learning, you know, and learning when it's appropriate to be opinionated and when it's not. I remember seeing things very much in black and white at that time of life. When I started hitting puberty, I was pretty upset that I was a girl because it just seemed very inconvenient to be a girl. And I was very much a tomboy at the time. Now, as I grew up and became comfortable with my body, I am fine being who I am. I love being a lady. But at the time it took some time to become comfortable with that. And I did fight against it when I was a teenager, but I also didn't, I pursued other interests, always been detail oriented. Some of my playtime, when I was 11, I made this dollhouse out of a cardboard box, and my sister and I did it, one of my many sisters. We took this paper box and made a dollhouse room out of it. We made cardboard furniture and toothpaste cap lamps and just whatever we could find. We made it all up. I had the most fun with that ever. I remember being very detailed in the things I started making for that. And that actually grew into another hobby, not another hobby, but it developed into a more complex hobby of making dollhouses and miniatures when I was a teenager. I've always been interested in houses, architecture. I remember drawing houses as a little kid. That's one way I passed the time in church. Or I'd count the rows of the ceiling tiles or whatever was there were a lot of different ways, but I ended up developing this hobby of doll houses. And once for my 13th birthday, that was kind of the special birthday in our family. I'm not sure how it originated, but that was the special birthday where we got just a little bit, we got something different. And for my 13th birthday, I wanted this particular set of doll furniture. It was a dining room table and chairs and something else. It was just, to me, it was fancy. It would look beautiful in my dollhouse. Well, I didn't get that. I got tools and wood to make my own furniture, and I was pretty disappointed. But in the end, that gift has always stuck out in my mind as one of the most beneficial, the one that I got the most enjoyment from long term. I would have gotten some enjoyment out of a ready-made set of doll furniture. It would have been fun to play with, but then that would have been it. But this allowed me to develop another side of me I didn't know existed and be able to design doll furniture, to make all these little pieces. Of course, my first attempts were not very pretty, but I was able to develop it into a pretty artful skill and very detailed furniture in the end. I haven't kept that hobby up. There were some other reasons I dropped it later on, and now life is just too busy to pick it up again, but I still enjoy it. Every time there's a dollhouse, I have to stop and look at it.
Do you think I don't blame you because I remember my dad's babysitter. We inherited some of her stuff and she loved the dollhouses and the different things like that. And I was thinking while you were saying that you got wood and tools to make your own furniture, and you said how it was this satisfaction long term and not short term, and it unlocked a side to you. Do you think your mom and dad just knew there was more to you than just
Looking back, they probably realized that this would be a better gift long term than just a ready-made set. One thing I love about my parents is that they allowed us to explore all kinds of different hobbies. One thing about us that the people who know me have heard before, but we didn't grow up with TV. So as
awesome?
I mean, we had small bits of pop culture that we knew, but there was, generally speaking, we just didn't watch TV. And so we played outdoors, we played indoors, we scurried away anytime mom wanted help with housework or dad had something that he wanted us to do, we'd try to get out of it. But we had a lot of time because there wasn't TV in our lives to develop different hobbies or musical skills. So just about all of my brothers and sisters developed skill in some musical instrument or multiples. And then this is one thing I was able to develop in my life. Another sister was very good with quilting and cross stitch. Several in my family have been very gifted in cake decorating. My brother did model cars that were very realistic, very exquisite. So we were all given the space and the freedom to just go explore the different things that we liked. We found some things we liked, some we didn't. I did start learning to play trumpet, but never became very good at that. But the only reason I learned to play was because the boy I liked at the time played trumpet. And so I just wanted to be like him. I wanted to play it too. And I did enjoy it for several years, but I ended up giving it up because I didn't want to become gravelly in my voice. I enjoyed singing much more than playing a trumpet. And from what I see other people becoming it with long-term trumpet playing is that their voice becomes gravelly. And I still like sounding like a lady.
Don't blame
And
you
I like
there.
being able to sing.
Yes, that's true. You have a beautiful voice.
Thank you.
So what I want to do is we're talking so much of hobbies, which is just naturally what both of us consist of is just hobbies. Like we just love things and being creative. And I was thinking about the idea of, when you grow up as a kid, it's so easy to just pick something up, just to go and do it. And then as you grow up, things get in the way, things happen, and it kind of stifles things. Did you try to stay creative throughout your entire life? Or was there moments in your life where you're like, okay, I'm really going to pick up a hobby again. I need it as something that is, I know for me, working and doing the different things that I do is just an outlet to just pour into, and my thoughts are quiet or they're really lasered into being able to process my thoughts and things. Tell me, as you grew up, your kind of idea in your relationship with creativity?
Well, that's an interesting question. I remember always having a creative side of some sort. I was never great with artistic mediums such as paint, chalk, pencil. I can do okay with some of those mediums, but it never. That's not where I ended up going with it. But the creativity can come out in so many different ways. A lot of it, as a kid, a lot of it was play. I set up a library of all the books and our family has always had tons of books, lots and lots of reading. We all love to read. But I set up a library system and I was the librarian and I made little cards people had to check out. This was long before anything digital, but at that time, it was in the 80s and I made little cards to go with the books and if anyone wanted to read the book, they had to check it out. And
I
then
love that.
I also had I played around with writing books when I was a kid, as far as making up a story, drawing the pictures that go with it, and then stapling all the pages together. Some of the creativity was when I was, I can't remember how old I was. I may have been 9 or 10 years old. I was at my grandparents' house, and we had a big family reunion there. And anything to do with our family is automatically huge because of the size of our family. But
Right.
this was aunts, uncles, cousins, extended family. And when the main meal was over, or people were mainly done with it, but then ready to snack, I set up snacks in her kitchen and then started charging people for them.
Oh my gosh.
So I was a little entrepreneur at 9 or 10 years old, whatever it was. Everyone played along with my game pretty well. And I don't know, I can't remember if I kept the money or not. I just remember always having some kind of a business mind like that, trying to get something going. In real life, it took, quite a few years longer for anything to actually stick as far as any businesses go. But that was my first foray into being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, yeah. What was school like? What was college like? What was the atmosphere between you and your creativity? What did you want to be as a little girl?
As a little girl, I don't remember specifically as a little girl. I don't remember that part, but I do remember as a teenager, I wanted to be an Air Force pilot. Yes, I did not become an Air Force pilot, but that's what I wanted to be I remember very distinctly for several years as a teenager, that's what I wanted to be
Why was that?
because airplanes are cool.
Yeah.
That was it. Loved the F-16 was my favorite jet. And we went to some air shows and I loved seeing the maneuvers. I just wanted to be able to fly an airplane, specifically a fighter jet. But eventually that dream fell by the wayside. Part of the reason I gave that up was because my eyesight wasn't great. And
Mm.
at the time, this was before LASIK was a big thing. I know it was just becoming a more popular surgery in the 90s, but I ended up giving up that dream. But I've always had a dream to write, to speak. I actually enjoy stages. I know that gives a lot of people fright, but I've always enjoyed a stage, not to have a spotlight on me, but just because I enjoy
Entertaining.
entertaining or sharing a story, or I like having my voice heard in one degree or another, and it feels a little bit selfish or prideful to say that, but that's not where my motivation is for being on a stage. I just truly enjoy it.
No, I think a lot of people that love to be, we'll call it the spotlight in a sense that it's not the spotlight where it's just on you, where you might be in the chorus or you might be in whatever it is. I think what it is it fills our heart. It's giving actually in our mind
Yeah.
because it's like for we've done shows together, right? We've done
Yeah.
some theater together. And first off, I can remember sitting in the theater. It was the Eagles Theater, and it was for Fireline. They had done Steel Magnolias, which was my favorite movie because Dolly is in there. For anybody that knows me knows I'm a huge
Oh,
Dolly
yeah.
Parton fan. But I remember this was right after auditions for Sweet Surrender for us. And I hadn't really met anybody from it, but I just have known as far as they let us know what the names were, and I kind of stalked everybody on Facebook because I was like, I don't know any of these people, so I'm like, what do they
That's
look
fair.
like, right?
Mhm.
And so I decided we went to the show of Steel Magnolias, and I turn. And here comes you. Okay, you're walking down this aisle. Like you got to understand, Rebecca is insanely like just a beautiful person in and out completely. And she has the amazing ability to wear absolutely anything, and it looks so good.
Well,
Like,
thank you.
she has
I don't think I deserve the compliment,
would
but thank
just
you.
it's the truth, though. I remember turning, and you wore, like, a fedora? Is that the right word for that hat?
Oh, was it the red one?
Yes!
The red hat. I love that red hat. Yes, I
Gosh,
remember.
I
Yep.
love it. I loved it so much. I turn and I'm like, "Who is this woman?" I was, like, just really nervous to work with you, but it was great. I was like, "This is amazing because you wear what you want." And, you talked about how when you were growing up I was very much a tomboy as well, and I fought that for a very long time, in fact, way too long. I'll be honest, fought way too long. And my sister will say, "You never got a style until, like, last year." So, there you go. And so I used to look at myself, and I love that you said this, is you had to get comfortable within your body, and you had to get comfortable with who you were and
Mhm.
your own image of yourself. And sometimes that personifies out on people in a way that almost because you toiled and you thought about yourself and not in a selfish way, but as in a learning experience, I feel like it just radiates confidence from you. And I love that when I see you, I think, wow, she just is so womanly, right? And I know that sounds like I nothing in a dirty sense. It's just the beautifulness of being a woman, having that ability to just be a woman and be fully that and just really take it in and for all that it is. I just every time I see you, I think, wow, she's just a woman. And I love that.
Well, thank you. I
I love
appreciate
that.
the compliment.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the fact that when we first met and we started, doing shows together, and that I got to just get to know you as a person, and that was just the most lovely thing. Can you talk to me a little bit about what goes through your mind as, you're a mother, you work really hard, you're a realtor, you're constantly busy. We were talking about getting notifications on our phones and we just
Yes.
want to keep them turned off or whatever it might be. And how do you balance being a person as a mother? Okay. Because sometimes I know pretty much any mother is going to just give all themselves. And
Yes, absolutely.
there is a time period where that is necessary. But there is also like this essence of you do need to get your cup filled as well.
Mhm.
Not that the kids don't, right? I don't have kids, but I know because a lot of my friends talk about it because they have kids. And I think about how do you balance being your own person as an entity? Entity. That's the word with a T. But how do you balance that with being a mother and still get filled?
That's another talent I had to develop. I will say when I became a mother, I was in an abusive marriage. I didn't realize at the time it was. I just was trying my best to be perfect, realizing years later that I could not be perfect in this marriage, that I just was not going to be good enough no matter what I did. So, frankly, I just wore myself out. As a young mother, wore myself out trying to keep the house absolutely perfect. I worked hard with meals. I was babysitting other kids at the time. And once my kids are only 17 months apart. So my youngest was about a year and a half. I started doing alterations in my home. And at first it was really just a way to make some extra money. It was hard to find ways to fill. I wasn't thinking of it in terms of filling my cup creatively at the time. That wasn't a thought. But looking back, some of the ways I did was just in decorating my home. Reading was another outlet for my mind to explore and for me to go to worlds that I would never be able to visit in real life, usually because it was a historical novel
Right.
and the time is simply gone. Getting my cup filled, then I would say as the alterations business took off, that I established pretty quickly in that because nobody sews, and when somebody does sew, everyone starts latching on, and so I learned quickly the types of work that I liked, and I started expressing some create pretty much in wedding dresses or in prom dresses. People would come to me with some seemingly impossible problem, and I always thought there was a way to fix it, and sure enough, there's a way to fix just about everything for the right amount of money. I will say some things are not worth doing, but forced me to problem solve. That's one thing I always have enjoyed is problem solving. And so in any type of work I've done, whether I'm getting a paycheck or whether I've got my own business, the problem solving aspect has always been appealing to me. And it forces creativity when you're up against something that seems impossible, or it's a problem you haven't faced before, and you learn how to work through it and in the end come out with a good product or a good, get to the end goal, whatever that end goal is. Before I was married, I worked in the architectural engineering field, and there, a lot of I wouldn't say I got to express creativity there, but the problem solving aspect was general. It was always an aspect of that job where I had to figure out how to get our company's product to fit this architect's design for a building, whether it was realistic or not. I know they go through tests and, there are a lot of steps before the plans would get to our office, but in the end, we had to make sure our product worked, and I drew the pieces that would go on the buildings. But there were plenty of times to problem solve in that case. But generally speaking, even farther back, I will say my first paycheck job was at a pizza shop in our town. And I think what I enjoyed the most through all these jobs that I've had and different career paths is the people. The people have inspired me. I have a saying that I borrowed from somewhere. I cannot remember where it came from, but all people give joy, some by coming and some by going. And I end up, most people have added to my life in a good way. Some better off going their own way, but the people are what I've enjoyed the most of all through my life. But then as far as creativity, I'm trying to tie back to your question. I go on rabbit trails all the time.
No,
I'm sorry.
I love it. I'm listening and I'm not even
I
thinking
feel like
about
I have squirrels in my head and they're just running around trying to chase. I'm trying to chase one
No,
and catch it. Get that thought out before
It's a very vague question. Okay, so about, now you're a mother,
Mhm.
you've
Oh,
in this situation, and now things are changing and things are happening to change,
mhm.
right? So how do you tell me how you kind of steered your way through life after everything?
Um,
Things unfolded in your life.
okay. Well, that's a vague reference. And for people who don't know me, the things that unfolded in my life were I realized I was in a very abusive marriage. I thought for years, I just thought I was trapped in that. It felt like a prison sentence because I was raised that you just don't get divorced. And so it never even occurred to me for years to consider divorce. And when I finally did, at that point, I had done everything. I had satisfied my conscience that I had done everything possible to try to save the marriage. And I realized that it takes two to row that boat. In the end, I filed for divorce. And thankfully, that process went pretty smoothly for me. I feel deeply for the women and men too. Men go through abusive situations as well. But what I hear about more often is the women. I feel very deeply for the ones who have a much harder time than I did. But as far as the creativity at that point and with motherhood, I started writing a blog it was very late 2019 or early 2020. It was right at the end of the year of 2019. It was my creative outlet. I needed some way to process life, to write whatever I was thinking. I didn't want to write a blog about a specific topic because that gets boring really fast. And I've got too many squirrels to chase in my head to keep on one topic forever. So I decided this writing project was just going to be whatever I wanted to write for 10 minutes. And I told myself specifically it did not have to be perfect, just done. That was it. Write for
Mhm.
10 minutes and whatever comes out, that's what it is. And then as that developed, I started learning how to take pictures of different things. I'm nowhere near the level of picture taking you are, Lauren. You're fabulous. I love seeing all the pictures you post on Facebook. You're amazing. If anyone has not seen her work, check it out.
Oh my gosh.
But I did start learning how to take some pictures and some things that work and some that don't. But that blog was an outlet for me to be creative, but also to process life. Because at the time I was struggling with wondering, you know, why is everything so hard? Of course, life's going to go up and down. Life will always have things that are hard in it. That's called being human. But as I went on, I realized this is more than normal, more than I should be going through. And that was specifically related to the marriage. I also realized another pattern was just in motherhood. I was realizing that I was getting angry at my husband for the way I was being treated, but then I would take it out on my children. And as soon as I realized that, I pulled back and telling them if I was catching myself in that behavior, telling them I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at something else, and it's wrong for me to express it this way. I'm sorry. So I would apologize to my kids, at any time. And I have since told them there are many things I would do differently if I could raise them all over again. I think every parent that I know of looks back and thinks the same thing. You just learn and grow as a person, or at least you should. A healthy person learns and grows. And I wish I could go back with the wisdom I have now and redo the years. But thankfully, my children have been very gracious, and they are wonderful kids. But that blog was an outlet for me to release a lot of the tension and sort through the mess that was going on in my life at the time. And I still love writing, but I will say I've abandoned it lately, and I don't like that. I don't like that about myself.
Well, we were talking about this right before we pressed record. We were talking about writing and
Hmm.
everything. And when I first met you, I remember reading it. I'm like, wow, this is just good. This is just good. And I think you should pick this up because I think you need to, I nourish that side of you because
Hmm.
you are such a natural writer. And I really want to say, first off, thank you so much for being so transparent about things in your life.
Hmm.
You don't have to share your story and you don't have to say all the things that you've said so far, but I hope that it helps somebody today to
Hmm.
get through. What I feel like when first started out on this podcast, I feel like I had an idea of what I wanted to talk about. But as I keep getting to know you and keep talking to you, it's just morphed into something so much more, which happens a lot, right?
I can imagine.
It's morphed into motherhood and getting through the hard patches and getting through dealing with things that you never at first expected. And if somebody's going through something right now, how can somebody get through? What would you, looking back, you said writing really helped.
Yes, writing helped me. I will say something else that I don't know how to tell someone to do this, but I generally have a pretty positive outlook on life. It's not at times in my life, I think it was the Pollyanna positive outlook that was unrealistic. But as I've grown older and realized where there's a will, there's a way, it has helped me through so many situations that looking back, I don't know quite how I did it. I was completely exhausted for years on end. Motherhood in itself is exhausting. I should say parenthood. There are dads that work just as hard as moms
Right,
too. It's
right.
not just the moms, but I know moms in a
Lens.
larger proportion are the ones that are worn out, exhausted from raising kids. I kind of joke that I haven't slept for 16 years. It's not true, but that's what it feels like sometimes. But some of what got me through is I feel like there's always hope. It would be easy to get into a mentally tumultuous state by reading too much news or reading any news, by worrying about things around me. Another one, by trying to control other people.
Right.
That's a big one. Once I learned I can't control anybody else, including my own children, I can help guide them. But in the end, they have their own thoughts and they're their own people.
Right.
They are going to be who they are. Once I let go of that kind of control, I felt like there was a way forward. I could just move with life instead of fighting against it and trying to force an outcome. I can't force any outcome. I mean, obviously, we all want our kids to grow up well, to be productive people, to be good people. But in the end, I can only raise them the best I can, hope that for a good outcome, and then that's ultimately up to them. But what I can control is myself. And I think that was one thing that once I started realizing I'm in control of myself, that gave me hope through some of the darkest years of my life. As I mentioned before, my first marriage felt like a prison. Honestly, didn't know any way of escaping because I was raised that divorce is not an option. You get married and you're just married forever. So I assumed that only death would part us, and I was kind of wishing that it would hurry up one way or another. I never had suicidal ideations, but I remember being trapped in such a dark prison at that time. And I won't go into detail, but I was living with a very emotionally unstable man, and that can turn very scary very quickly. Anyone who's been in that type of situation with domestic violence knows how quickly the tables can turn. You might think it's a normal day, and you're walking on eggshells because you always do. But then all of a sudden, the wind shifts and you're no longer safe. at all. You're never really safe in that situation, but you have times where you feel relatively safe versus times where you're just flat out scared. I did have an overnight bag packed in the car ready for if the kids and I needed to get out. There was a point that was just dark and scary. I didn't know what kind of mood my husband would be in at the time. I didn't know what version of him was going to walk through the door, and I had to have an escape plan. And at some point, I remember just being smacked upside the head with the realization that normal wives don't go through life having to have an escape plan. What am I thinking? Something's really wrong with this situation. In the end, it was the following summer that I did file. And at that point, realized I'd done everything I could. But what scared me the most and really caused me to pull the trigger was when my kids I was seeing them normalize their dad's behavior. This is all they knew. And so to them, that's how daddies treat mommies. And why should it be any different? And that scared me because I realized that if I didn't try stopping the cycle of abuse, then I could potentially be starting a generational pattern because it's what they grew up in. They would know, or they would likely continue on in patterns that were destructive. And it scared me to think that I could be harming potential grandchildren down the road by allowing such demeaning behavior toward myself. I have now shown my children a different way. I don't put up with that. But it took years to wake up to how I was being treated, to realize that I could get out, and then to start a path toward mental health again, or just, I should say, not mental health in the sense that we think of it all the time, but more of a deconstructing the beliefs that I had before and realizing there's a different way. It doesn't always have to be the way I was used to. There are different ways to live. And once I was divorced, I did eventually start taking time to explore things that I had wanted to do and I had done before. I had done civic theater in my early 20s, but being a mom of young kids, there's not much you can do but survive. Honestly, when your kids are little, you just are surviving very often. But a lot of the creative pursuits that I had before, I dropped partly because I didn't think I was allowed to at the time. In my first marriage, there were a lot of things that whether he didn't allow me to do it or I elected not to do because I thought I was going to get in trouble doing. I just left a lot of things to the wayside that I wanted. I felt like I became a shell of who I was. The cicadas, they're disgusting, ugly things, but they demonstrate when you see that little shell hanging on a tree, that's what I felt like. The outline was there, but I wasn't really there. And the people that have known me since before my first marriage, known me after, they said my smile returned. Multiple people who don't know each other in real life have said the same thing. I felt like I was freed from a prison. The relief was indescribable, actually, once I was free of that first marriage. But I said I was able to start pursuing other creative interests. I met you in theater. That was fun. I loved the plays that I've done since the divorce. But dance fitness, I went to the Y and I started exploring all kinds of things that whether I didn't know if I liked them or not because I hadn't tried them. So I would just go try things. And that was one of those things that I do off and on still because I enjoy it.
But you've took up theater, but you've really latched on to dancing.
Yes. Ballroom dancing, I will say, has been the thing in my life besides my family and friends. Because there's just no other category that replaces family and friends.
Yes,
I love people. But ballroom dancing has been the thing that has filled up my happy bucket more than anything in life. I absolutely love it. It's been a little over 3 years ago. I started off with the beginner group class, and by 2 weeks in, I was hooked. I will say, when I go to those classes, and I still go, same studio. I signed up for private lessons very soon after I started the group lessons because I realized I just wanted to do this forever. Now, I will say it was very hard to convince myself to spend the money on private lessons.
That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you about, that process of coming into the new, really spending time on yourself and money on yourself. When you decided to do that, how did you coil with that? What was that?
Well, I think it took me 2 weeks to come to a decision because I was grappling with is it okay for me to spend money on myself? A lot of parents in general, but moms specifically, I'm speaking from the mom side because that's what I know. A lot of moms have a very hard time spending money on themselves because when we spend money, it's things for the kids, it's things for the house, it's the groceries, it's not the fun stuff. And why would we go blow it on ourselves because there's not something tangible to bring back and contribute to the household with it? I had years. I'd been married for almost 17 years at the time we divorced. And my kids were, I think 11 and 12 when I finally divorced. But anyway, I had years established of that thought pattern of never spending money on myself because that's selfish. That's what I thought. So I finally realized if I put myself forward in my head 10 years, oh, and that's another thing, squirrel. If I project into the future 10 years or so, it really helps me to make a decision and to find hope, like, is this the path I want or where do I want to be in that time frame? So back on that thought of what gets me through hard things, I project out into the future at whatever time interval, and it helps me push through hard things. So anyway,
That's
back on
good. That's really good.
back on the ballroom dancing, I was thinking, well, in 10 years, I'll still be coming up with the same excuses. Well, it's expensive. There's always something else to spend the money on. I should be saving it. I should be whatever the fill in the blank excuse is. And I finally decided if I don't do this now, I never will. And so I did. And I've never once regretted it. Ballroom dancing is extremely hard when you start learning technique and when you're using correct technique. And it's going to take my lifetime to keep learning it. But it's a full body workout to do it correctly. And so it's not that it's not easy, but I've enjoyed every bit of it. Learning every single week, sometimes 2 times a week, sometimes 3 times a week I'm there. I love every bit of it. And the fun part, one of the best parts is the people I've met. And it's not just dance, but it's theater, it's different singing, like community choir. They're everywhere I go with dance fitness too. There have been fabulous people, and I've made so many new friends that I didn't have several years ago when I was stuck in an abusive marriage and couldn't do anything.
Right.
And so you're one of the friends I've made in that time frame. There are a group of friends of us at the dance studio that we love just hanging out with each other outside of the time that we have dancing. We're checking in on each other. But that's been with all these different friend groups I've made. It's like they're the creative part of any recreational activity is its own fun, but to me, the people are an extension of that fun and make it that much more fun. And when I was learning who I was again after the divorce and just getting back out and doing things, I would go to live music events. I would go out to eat. I would see shows. I would do basically if my schedule allowed for it and my kids were taken care of, whatever, I would go do the things that I wanted to do because even if I was lonely, I decided I'd rather be lonely with other people than all by myself. So
Yeah.
I got out of my house and did lots of things, and I loved every bit of it.
It's awesome.
So
I think about that when I decided to try out for theater. That was kind of like how I was. I mean, obviously my story is so different than yours, but I do realize that I know that feeling of I want to be with people even if I'm not,
mhm.
uh, even if I'm not feeling like it, even if
Yeah.
or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
because it fills my cup. And
Yes.
I've always been a people person.
I have too.
I love it. So, okay, we are getting really close to the end of time, and there's so much that we could talk about on this episode, but I wanted to talk about one way of, okay, so you decided to start doing the ballroom dancing. Okay, and what age were you when you started doing that?
Let's see, I actually have to think. I was 43.
43. So there's another woman out there right now listening, or man, or anybody at any age, 80 to my age or down. What advice would you give them to start something new? What would you tell them to do and not to think about maybe? What is some advice for people to start picking something new up?
I would say if you're not dead, it's not too late. Go ahead, try it. If you're interested in learning a new skill, going somewhere, whatever is capturing your interest, try it. It may be that you have to save up some money to try it. I know travel can be expensive. That's one thing I love to do. My husband I'm married to now, he's a wonderful man, but we love to travel. But so we have a whole list of places we want to go, but do it. Don't wait because you never know what tomorrow will bring. You don't know how much time you have left. I know that's a
Mhm.
morbid thought, and always think pretty positively. But reality is, none of us know what time we're given here on earth.
Right.
And I think if I get to the end of my life and look back and realize I still have a whole list of things I wanted to do and never did, or people to connect with, or experiences, people, skills, all the things that I want to do, honestly, I'd have to live to be 500 years old to do all my list. But
Here.
I'm doing my best to get to the end of my life and be able to look back and see that I've had those experiences. I've connected with those people. Family and friends specifically are extremely important to me. And I don't want 10 years to go by and me to look back and realize I haven't made any progress toward the things that develop me more as a person and just make me a better human being. I don't feel like I'm anything special or honestly, I told you before, I don't feel like I'm a very interesting person,
Which
but
is not true.
thank you. I don't, it's hard to,
I
it's
know
hard
what
to
you
think
mean.
that about myself.
Yes.
I feel like I'm pretty boring and plain, but I always want to have experiences and connections with people to look back on. That's what fills me up. So I would say go for it. Just do it. If you're not dead, do it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think that's an amazing thought to have people realize that they can do absolutely anything. And it doesn't I think what the problem is for my generation especially and those who are so sucked into social media, you see the perfection of people's lives so
Mhm,
much. And you see the good part that
mhm.
when they're playing the piano, they don't hit the wrong key because they cut it. I do that sometimes. I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"Oh man, this is bad." But you know what I mean? You see the edited version of somebody's life, and I
Mhm,
think we start to compare. Now, have you ever, in this process of starting something new, to help people get through this process of starting something new, your first day you're in the ballroom, how did you deal with the nerves and the negative thoughts in your mind? Like, what am I doing? But this is great. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes, I know what you mean. I can't remember my particular thought process for that, but I will say in general, I've learned to just be okay with being a beginner. Nobody starts at an advanced level with anything. It's okay to start at the very bottom, know absolutely nothing, and just start learning from step zero because it feels like step one is even a step up. Just start there at the beginning. I think part of we have to get over worrying about what other people think. We have to live our own lives. Nobody else is looking at our lives, critiquing it quite the way we are. Benefit of the age I'm in my 40s. Benefit is that I really just don't care what other people think. As long as I'm not hurting somebody else, obviously that would be wrong, but if I'm not hurting somebody else, then I don't really care what somebody else thinks about what I'm doing. It's not their business. It's my business to live my life, and I enjoy it. There are parts that are hard. Life goes up and down for everybody, but I've learned to be okay with just not being good at everything I try. I can learn it. Some things I do become good at or relatively good at, but then other things probably will always be a mystery to me and I won't be great. But I never look back on life and regret the experiences I've had in the things that I've wanted to do or the things that I've purposely
Mhm.
tried. I would make some different choices given the experience I have now. I would make different choices in my early 20s as to some of the direction of my life, particularly my first marriage. But um, I love my kids. I wouldn't give them up for anything. So that's a conundrum. So anyway, I think what I've been through though has made me who I am, and I want to keep adding to that.
That's so good. That's so good. Okay, so I'm gonna ask, you never compare yourself to anybody, do you?
Yes, I do. I do compare myself to. Okay, there are other agents in our office, and I look at how in the real estate office, and I look at how they systems they have. I'm like, that's who I wanna be. I wanna as wonderful as they are. In the end, I develop my own systems, but there are many people I look up to. My husband, for instance, his name's Phil, by the way. He is very, very analytical. He's very talented in a lot of areas, and he is strong in areas where I'm weak, and I look at that and I'm like, "Well, I wanna be that." Well, in the end, I'm gonna be who I am, but I think in the end, we being around good people or people that we respect and look up to helps us to become a better version of ourselves, even though I'll never be a different person. I'll be me. But if I can learn things from other people, I definitely want to. So to say I don't care what other people think maybe is an overstatement, but generally speaking, like if some stranger's going to come in and judge my life, I don't really care. but I do want to be a good version of myself. So, in that sense, I do care what those that matter to me think about me in that sense. But that's a small circle in terms of the people, the number of people I know.
Do you think it's an intention thing? Like, if, um if you look at somebody with the intention of comparing yourself and downsizing yourself, or do you think, you use the word looking up to somebody. It's kind of like with anything in our lives. I think we feel like if our heart posture isn't correct when we look at something, whether it's scrolling through social media or on the dance floor and you watch somebody go by, if your heart posture isn't in the right place of truly loving who you are and you just want to grow as a person, do you think that comparison changes when it comes to that? Do you think it's just about intention in your mind?
Possibly, I try not to stay stuck on something like that. It's just very unproductive to
And you're
stay.
detail oriented and
Yeah.
you're very in control. Yes, I got you.
But it's unproductive to spend too long not being okay with myself. I mean, I'm always striving to be a better person, but in the end, I can't. I do critique myself quite a bit, but it's
In efforts to enhance the people around you. As a person, you
Mhm.
need to be able to have you can't pour from an empty cup,
Right.
right? So
And
you're
pour from
enhancing
mhm.
yourself possibly to be able to really give to other people. I
Mm.
feel like we do, especially as women, we talked about a lot about selfishness. I feel like we tend to act out in the way that is so over giving
Mhm.
to where we've we've poured everything and we're only able to stay within those parentheses because that's all we have. Like
Yes.
whatever. And everybody does this.
Mhm.
Everybody does this. Okay, so I know we've been everywhere and everything in this podcast, and I love this. I love this, and I can't wait to just listen back and hear everything again. I want to ask, ending this here, because we talked about a very sensitive and I fully appreciate what you have told me, and I want to know, what would you tell somebody that might have went through the same thing or is in the same thing as you? What would you tell them to do to get out, and how did you learn to forgive yourself?
Well, I had to first become okay with the idea that I wasn't going to hell for filing for divorce. I don't know, I can only speak from my background, and what I went through. So everyone's going to have a little different experience. I was much more bound in my head than in real life because I believed I was stuck there forever in what felt like a bleak, dark prison of marriage. It felt like chains. I didn't know a way out. Once I started realizing, no, I wasn't going to go to hell. No, I wasn't a bad person for filing for divorce or even considering it. Just the thought of it felt like too much to take on at one point. I mean, I just had to grow in what I was comfortable with, realizing that God hates abuse. He doesn't hate divorce, he hates abuse. And that can come in all kinds of forms. So I also had to become comfortable, or not comfortable, but okay with the embarrassment that it caused because I I was in a family where divorce was pretty rare. I didn't have examples of it in my life that were close to me, so I didn't know what it was supposed to look like. I just knew, they were the people that got talked about behind their backs at church or wherever in the community. And I didn't want to be that, but I had to stop living my life for the image that I projected to other people. For a long time, I pasted on what I thought was a pretty picture. We had a nice little home, we had nice cars, we had a nice business, he had a job, we had kids that were in school doing fine, or seemingly everything was fine in life, but I was dying inside. I honestly don't know if I had stayed in that situation. I don't know what life would look like right now or what health problems I would have. I don't know. I don't even like going down that trail very often. I don't want to go down that trail at all. It didn't happen. It wasn't good though. Everything was getting darker and worse in my life at that point. But for other people, I think coming to the realization that where there's a will, there's a way. And that's a very simplistic way to put it because there are logistic problems that a lot of women face. Unfortunately, some women face very violent threats from their husband that they may act on. Domestic violence is real and it's scary. So each woman that's in that situation knows maybe what is safe for her to do. But for me, what I ended up doing was start formulating a plan. I did open a different bank account so that I could have my own money separate from the family money and not just have nothing if I had to leave. I mentioned an overnight emergency bag that I had for the kids and me if we had to run. Thankfully, I never had to use it, but it was there, and it was a scary time of life to have to prep that. Also, at some point, there was one point I started talking to some friends because I was struggling with what to do. These were friends who knew the situation. They were friends of both of ours and had tried to help my first husband just get back to good behavior again, or just being a good person. But he was not listening, and so they knew parts. They knew some of the parts that were visible. It was scarier within the enclosed walls of a home, and nobody else is there. But I started collecting important things, important documents that I thought I would need, if, copies of important documents, tax returns, anything I would need to establish my own life apart from my husband if I needed it. If I needed to. I even collected family photos, some of the irreplaceable things. My house was full of what I call garage sale stuff because I don't really care about the dishes, the lamps, the furniture. That can all be replaced. It doesn't matter to me, but there are a few things, such as the family photo albums and some carvings from my grandpa. Those couldn't be replaced. My dad had made some things. I had stuff from mom, and I had those all in a safe place to where at least they wouldn't be hurt if the outcome was pretty bad when I gave him the divorce papers. But I had called a divorce lawyer about 9 months before I filed because I had no idea what it was supposed to look like. And she gave me some pointers on those things to get in line and also to document. That was another big thing. She had me document every instance, and it didn't have to be chronological. As I remembered specific instances of domestic violence, I wrote them down and I added to the list as I look at the things I went through. It's not nearly as bad as what some other people end up going through, but in the end, it was bad. It was still abusive, even though it wasn't the same degree as some other women face. I don't like. I don't want to minimize my experience or anyone else's. It was mine. I can't go back and change it now. I learned from it. I had a support network. I had some brothers that lived out of state at the time, and they saw some concerning things about my first marriage and privately told me if I ever needed a place to run, I could go there. So having a place to go that was apart from um, the surroundings of my ex-husband was pivotal. In the end, I had a lot of support from family and friends. They didn't know what I was going. Well, some of the friend group knew because they saw his behavior when he let it slip. But my family didn't know what all he was doing. My parents had no idea what he was like until I called them and said I had filed, and I let them know what I was going through just so that they weren't, just to prepare them for the storm that I had coming in life. Well, continuation of a storm. It was taking a different turn, I should say. It was all a storm, but that was a turn in the right direction for my life. If you can get out, if you're unsafe, get out if you can. I don't know what to say to women who can't. I honestly don't. I feel like crying for some of the situations I've heard about where the husband stalks the wife, won't let her leave, manipulates her in all kinds of ways, controls the finances, won't let her have access to any privacy at all, any phones, social media. There's anyone that's trying to control another person's access to a normal life is a huge red flag. So all I can speak as is from my experience, and that was what I went through.
I'm over here trying to keep it together myself, just listening to the power of your story. And I think the fact that you're talking about it and you're telling me about it and the awareness that comes from it is so amazing. So you're saying what worked for you, okay?
Mhm.
What worked for you was make a plan, have a friend group, somebody to trust within.
Yeah.
If you can have people around you that you can entrust that information with.
That won't endanger you with your ex, uh, or whoever you're trying to leave. You don't want someone that's gonna just call them up and say where you are.
Right. Or try
Mhm.
to fix you just either, in a
Yeah,
way. I know
at
at the
that point, you
beginning it's
just need support.
just need support. So having a trusting family or friend that you can confide in. And then also the fact that you talked about a bank account and talking to if you can get a hold of a lawyer just to get the idea of what to do or just the
Mhm.
thing in the documentation of it all. I will do some research on some sites or people that they can get in touch with
Mhm.
here locally and or anything like
I have
that.
some online resources that are really good for people that find themselves in this situation, and I can give those to you after this.
I would love that. I will add that to every
Okay.
description. Thank you so much for everything that you did today. Just sitting here and talking, and we had a lot of laughs, so we had a lot of really hard topics, but without the conversations, without creating awareness around things, nothing's going to change. Thank you for being so vulnerable, and thank you for trusting me with this
Well, thank you
talk.
for having me on. I really appreciate it. I was very honored that you even asked me. So thank you.
I think we could talk about a lot of things, and I just feel like it was very much led. From, in my lens, I feel like God's really led this
Mhm.
in our